presentation. It's called New Urbanist REIT. And get into it. Okay, so first off, we have a problem. New urbanists are great at finding and designing places, but not getting them funded. So and then another problem, partner developers need money to implement. So there's a lot of people within the New Urbanist community, like the NTBA, incremental developers. All of us talk and work with developers all the time. I mean, so that are doing these projects. Investors, and then another problem with New Urbanism is that investors have criteria that don't jive with New Urbanist building types, so super long lead times. There's not a lot of data around it. It's always mixed use. So like it's not as like straight up as doing a single use building. So all these coalesce into a problem that's hard to get funded, these projects. So my solution, we should start a New Urbanist real estate investment trust. So a real estate investment trust is basically a community of investors, and you bring together people and use their money to invest in projects. And so it's basically like, I'm sure everyone's or at least aware of it. So they have public ones, they have private ones, they have ones for neighborhoods, they have ones for like just like infrastructure, multifamily. But this one would be specifically for New Urbanist building types. So we bring together a group of investors and we would be able to provide returns for them, but also put more New Urbanist projects out there. So why do we need to do this? Why do we want to do this? Better ability to make places. So if we are able to like control more of the process, so we'd be able to do more projects. So a lot of New Urbanists, they sort of work on the design and like planning side, but like they just wait for the projects to come. If with this, we could be more of a proactive approach to doing more projects. So to stronger public-private partnerships. So with a lot of cities, you know, there's like this pairing between private development and public investment. If you are able to bring more private money to the table in towns that wouldn't get it otherwise, you're going to be able to create better public-private partnerships. And maybe you can have a third entity beyond the developer and the public institution that would help create this partnership. Also give New Urbanist members skin in the game. So each of us, if we had the ability to invest our own projects, you know, we could be putting our money where our mouth is, and we have more incentive, and we build, make like returns or retire possibly off of these sort of the work we do. And last, just show community and onlookers why New Urbanism is so valuable. If we could do more projects, we're going to be able to show more people why we do this. Okay, so this is like a diagram of how I think it should go down. Basically, the New Urbanist REIT is the middle of like you fund and acquire projects, and that's through the New Urbanist ecosystem, through developers or through, mostly developers in the New Urbanist ecosystem. You operate the building, and then you do like public-private partnerships, so you could sort of create a groundswell and just make better communities. So these are the like sort of building types that we could do, like the T&D, retrofits, mixed use infill, small developer, ADUs, sustainable infrastructure, walkable core buildings, receiver cities, missing middle, and anything that comes across the board. So that is my presentation. The next step to like really do this is to start one fund, buy one building, and then go from there. And that's it.
Very cool.
Thank you, Stig.
Okay, hi, Elysse. So as I said when I introduced myself, I started at Dover Coal recently. I actually started about 6 months ago now. And unfortunately, that was my first like interaction with CNU. And even, I mean, I went to the University of Florida, so we heard about New Urbanism, like in planning history class. Oh yeah, New Urbanism started, blah, 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 moved on. It was like 2 minutes and that's all I heard about it, which is really unfortunate. So I feel like my planning career hasn't really been centered on New Urbanism very much. So when I started my planning career, I actually started mostly international. And so now that I'm in CNU, I've been thinking about that a lot and how it relates to New Urbanism. So I started in, well, my first experience was in Haiti, but my main experience was in Jakarta. So Jakarta has 30 million people in it, which is astronomical. It's insane. And I've mostly focused on water management there. So the municipal water system, only 7% of the people, probably less, and most of them are really wealthy that are connected to it. Only 7% of 30 million people, which is insane. And a lot of the research I did was on flooding mitigation. So I went to the Netherlands right after this and looked at applying flood mitigation practices from the Netherlands in Jakarta, because Jakarta will be underwater by 2050. Unfortunately, I finished my master's thesis and presented all my findings, and then the government announced that they're actually just moving the capital. So they're abandoning all the buildings there and the entire city. But it was really interesting. Some of these I just like grabbed from an old presentation, so that's why they're kind of text heavy. But it was interesting to see the urbanism. So you have these kind of buildings that are people just built there out of whatever they could find. So a lot of these buildings, is it okay if I take my mask off because I'm presenting? Okay, I'm like dying. So a lot of these buildings, it was fascinating to see because people would leave the first floor. They would have like maybe just a couple things there, like blankets or whatever. And then when they all had a WhatsApp that was in the neighborhood. So somebody would post in the WhatsApp flooding, and everyone would go and just grab everything off the first floor, move it to the second floor, and then go to the elderly people and move all their stuff because they couldn't do it themselves. And that was like their emergency system, because you can't get fire trucks, you can't get government services in these areas, but these areas are walkable. I mean, they're needing services, they need roads. And so it kind of, they're eventually going to be redeveloped, obviously. Like these get knocked down constantly by the government. So it's, you don't want to lose the walkability, but also you need to like redevelop. Obviously, so it just goes back into like when this gets redeveloped, because it will, what is it going to look like at that point? And yeah, so the government there is obviously very like decentralized. They have so many issues. There's like so many districts because there's islands all over the country, and just lots of issues with the government. I also went to Haiti and got to see that. And also it's another place, like it's not just Jakarta, it's not just Haiti, it's so many different countries. And I think we think of new urbanism and we think of like, oh, it's all over Europe, they're doing it right. But there's other international places that aren't doing it right. And when are we going to start focusing on that? And a lot of these places like were, you know, European colonies, but they've since been degraded so much. And just the water system. I know in Haiti, the place that I went to said, yeah, after the earthquake, there's one bridge that connects the whole southern part of the island. And when it went down, that was it. There was nothing there. And you couldn't get emergency services at all. So it's kind of looking at connectivity, road networks, and when they get redeveloped, like what will they look like? We went to the Dominican Republic and we worked with group that was going to invest in some infrastructure, and every person we talked to was like, please give us sidewalks, because so many children have been hit on the street just getting to school every day. So what can you do to like improve the sidewalks, which is new urbanism. So these were some just discussion points. I know we're not going to discuss now, but I can pull it up later and we can do that. Okay.
Thank you, Elysse.
Guys.
Okay, my name is Alex, and I don't have like a typical planning degree or anything like that. I majored in geography, which is kind of where I got the idea to do just a little thing on participatory mapping, because we talk about how important it is, like when looking at the relationship between like built environments and natural systems and people, to get that local knowledge. And so I also didn't know if this was like a discussion or so. These slides are kind of really boring and I apologize. Okay, so I guess like first we can talk about maps, and the great thing in planning is that they make kind of visible what is otherwise invisible. They play a key role in design and implementation policies because they give people just a visual representation of what's happening. And they also let us then maybe see things that we weren't thinking about originally. And then community geography is this sector of geography that really places an emphasis on identifying the spatial thinking and how local knowledges will emerge from residents' experiences and how those can inform how we design a place or how we develop a project and stuff like that. And so maps plus community geography together basically produces this knowledge that will contribute to urban futures. And in comes with that participatory mapping. And this is something used by firms like the Baton Rouge Water Institute uses it to help specifically to use interactive mapping tools like ArcGIS or ArcCollector and get the community residents to use those, go out and plot data points themselves, and then maybe have that associate also that. So maybe write in their experience. Whether that be like, do you have a sense of attachment to this place? Why is that? Why do you enjoy visiting? A lot of times we see participatory mapping take place on coastal cities or in coastal communities because that's a really like interesting divergence of these places provide recreation and leisure opportunities, but they also in some places provide sustenance for like fishing communities. They also provide economic opportunities for in like tourist ways that are really instrumental to making sure that that community has the funds to support themselves. And so with participatory mapping, you not only can get that ground knowledge, the visualized challenges and assets that you may have not gotten through other like quantitative measures. It can improve service delivery. I know in planning, it's also like a pretty big struggle to be able to speak on something in a way that's tangible. We use a lot of technical language, and a lot of times that isn't accessible to everyday people, just a lot of like buzzwords and stuff like that. And then it can help accurately identify geographic disparities. So participatory mapping, in a sense, uncovers motivations that contribute to an individual's like formation of sense of place. And it can help designers and planners better identify places where these connections are made and formulate their designs and kind of the infrastructure they put in the spaces, just to make sure that that's addressing the community needs. So you can kind of use this in a way to like guide like research questions or projects. Be like, okay, why are particular places in blank, like Chicago, meaningful to people? Like, why is the lakefront meaningful? And how can this sense of place inform restorative design, especially with places that are like maybe their waterfronts are seeing a lot of like toxic algae blooms or sea level rise, that sort of thing. And this idea kind of came from this organization, this NSF organization called Citizen Science GIS, which is based in Florida. And they used participatory mapping in Belize to help map out where exactly like flooding issues were taking place. And then also using that to create data sets that weren't, you know, made from a consulting firm or an outside entity, but were actually coming from the people who live there. So yeah, I don't know. I guess the point of this is like, I'd really like to see participatory mapping used in a lot more design processes, as well as in planning. I know I don't work in the private sector, but I know in the public sector, everything's very like by the book, check mark, and I don't know, like Chuck can stand by this, but our form of engagement a lot of times where I work is like a comment card. But I think this definitely gets at, you know, the things that we really want to know a lot better. So that's all.
Awesome, thank you. I was kind of added to this last minute, so I didn't have a presentation prepared. So I'm just
That's
gonna
okay.
try to haphazardly blitz through this project that I'm currently working on in grad school. It's kind of a case study for a corridor. Actually, I'll give some background. So Mayor Lightfoot of Chicago has this Invest Southwest initiative that she is pushing to basically invest millions of dollars into historically underserved communities, being on the south and west side of the city. So there are specific corridors that have been identified, and our studio has been given one on Chicago Avenue from Kedzie to Pulaski, which is in Humboldt Park. Chicago Avenue runs from kind of the city core out towards suburbia. It's minor arterial. So that's a little bit of background. So yeah, that's kind of the scene. I kind of just laid it out to you. Like I said, it's historically disinvested. It's very rich culturally and ethnically. Historically, it's been a Black community. In recent years, there's been influx in Hispanic and Latino population in the area. There's been kind of, because of this disinvestment, a lot of scattered vacant lots that kind of has fractured the urban fabric and created kind of a disjointed community. You can see here, they have 20% of the parcels are vacant, and a lot of that has come recently. They've had about 300 demolitions in our study area in the past 15 years, and so that's kind of where a lot of this vacancy comes from. You can kind of see that the south side is less dense than the north side. It also has, because of the lack of investment, most of the building stock is built before 1938. The average age of the buildings in the area is about 1915. And there's been very little recent development. You can see that only less than 5% of the buildings are even from 1980 to the present. Kind of mentioned this earlier, it's very diverse, especially relative to Chicago, and it also has a younger population than kind of the normal status quo in Chicago. I'm going to skip through some of these because it's kind of a long presentation. I don't want to bore you guys too much. So you can kind of see some of the things that we identified that they're missing. They're a strong institutional corridor, but you can see in youth services, despite them having kind of a younger population, they have very little youth services. They have very little in the arts, very little in terms of grocery stores, kind of health, wellness, that kind of thing. And also they're lacking green space. What green space they have, from what we have understood talking to people in the community, is underutilized. So kind of building upon those, let's skip through. Okay, so kind of moving into that into more of like what we would probably be interested in, kind of planning and design. We did a transect analysis for our corridor, essentially looking at from the city center going out to our study area, what the kind of the footprint of the buildings looks like. So we kind of counted the number of floors that are committed to each of a few different land uses. You can see, and basically our main takeaway is that as you get closer to our study area, the kind of level, the amount and quality of uses within the area is kind of diminishing. And then kind of going a step further on that, we wanted to evaluate the vibrancy of our corridor. So we kind of created this system looking at Sainz topology, vibrancy, diversity of uses, corresponding that to score. And then we basically plotted that out for our study area, with the dark areas indicating the more vibrant blocks and the lighter areas indicating less. And then we overlaid that with vacant parcels to help identify sites we could potentially intervene, incorporating kind of new urbanist factors, because right now it's not a very walkable community. They're kind of missing a lot of those things. And so based on all that analysis, we identified 3 preliminary sites at this point where we could intervene to help improve upon kind of the issues that briefly touched on. So the first one is this park that I mentioned is underutilized. The city owns a firehouse that's there, and we're thinking about changing that into some sort of field house that could kind of accommodate more facilities and more events for the space, and kind of incorporating some programming into that as well. And then our next site, we're calling Tetris Block. It's kind of a disjointed amalgam of vacant parcels that the city owns along the corridor, surrounded by some less vacant or some less vibrant parts of the city. Something that we've heard is that there is a lack of kind of clean, safe, affordable housing. And so we're thinking about incorporating some sort of new housing structures with commercial on the the bottom floor, and possibly a community garden. And then our last one is kind of near what we've heard is a very vibrant, and what we've experienced a very vibrant block, and kind of trying to build upon the momentum that's already present there. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. Sorry, that was kind of all over the place, but I just kind of wanted to do something because I didn't want to be the only one not saying anything. But yeah. Thank you.
I'm Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
So I was listening to a podcast last week and I was like, what am I, at that time I was like, what am I going to talk about for this presentation? And I just keep thinking about how our group is the Emerging Leaders Task Force, and we have a lot of young people. We have a lot of people that are starting out or still in grad school. So like, what am I going to talk about? And so I think one of my biggest passions currently is like how to talk to people that are just starting out and how to like mentor them, or, I didn't really have someone when I was in school telling me, oh, this is how this is a good way to start off your career, or like, even like Elysse and I were talking about this morning, like, I didn't know I needed to negotiate my first job, like I didn't know there were certain things. I was so naive and no one told me. So anyway, I think this is like such a good topic. And so I was listening to this podcast called How to Be a Better Human. And they were interviewing someone named Dory Clark. And so she's a TED Talk speaker. She has a lot of TED Talks. And she also has 5 books that kind of talk about how to like stand out and network, and how to become a better professional, basically how to like play it for the long game. She's also a professor at Duke University in Columbia. So she thinks about this all the time, and she was talking about how to adapt to the changes in life, because a lot of times, recessions, or like even like for her experience was 9/11. She like lost her job right around that time, and she was like, how do I get back into my career? And so she lost her job and she was like, okay, I want to be a reporter. But then she was like, I need to adapt based on this change to something else, still related to my industry, but maybe it's not the, preferred dream job. So she was like, think about, consider jobs that are related and connected, but maybe it's not the job that you exactly want right now, because, like at least in that sense, you can like those kind of jobs can kind of connect to or create connections that you would otherwise not seen or thought about because you were so focused on this other job. And it also just like opens up different experiences. So you become a little bit more diverse, and you have more variety of experiences. And I think I can attest to that. Like I went into the public sector, and then once I was in the public sector, I was like, wait, I should really think about doing more design work, because when you're in the public sector, even though I was in design studio in the planning department, you don't really get immersed into design. So then I was like, okay, well, let me reinvent myself a little bit and go back to design world. So I think that, being agile and being able to adapt to those kind of rapid changes can open up to like different jobs, and those kind of building, like it'll create a stepping stone to where you want to be eventually too. And I think that just also creates this kind of like momentum and like social connections that I'll talk about in a little bit, where, where sometimes you can already like, you could stay in a place that's already got momentum. So for example, like, if you want to go somewhere and you want to, like she was talking about, don't put all your like eggs in one basket kind of thing. Like if you have an idea, don't just invest all your money in there, like test it out a little bit, get your niche little group or, like connections, see how they react. And then just, maybe that could be like a great way for you to get to where you want to be. So basically take small incremental risks. And then, so one of the things that I think is most important out of this is like, how do you create make this socially proof? Basically, how do you make it so that you keep these connections, or that you have a network, even professionally, that can like boost you up? So extend your social network. I think we're all doing that right now. You know, we kind of put ourselves out there, getting to know people that we wouldn't have if we would have just been connecting in our little regions or little like cities, like, you know, the chapters in our communities for like ULI or CNU or, you know, things like that. We're actually like trying to expand those kind of networks. And then also like working your way up. You know, you're not going to start off maybe like at the dream job that you want, but that's not a bad thing. You're actually like increasing your reputation and improving it, and more people are going to see it. So I think that's like a really smart way to do it. And then one thing that I always think about is like keeping these loose connections. Like Elysse and I were talking about this yesterday, like you can reach out to the one person that you met like at a conference just once, like reach out, keep those cards, like, you know, follow them on LinkedIn. Like I'm trying to be more active on LinkedIn because I realize so many people are really active on LinkedIn, especially the older generations. For some reason, they love it. And so like, I think just having like kind of confidence, you know, being able to just kind of put yourself out there a little bit goes a long way. So yeah, I think this applies to obviously a lot of us that are just starting out, or, you know, we're young. And then I think this also applies as like how we were talking about yesterday, like CNU is aging out. And so, you know, like the founders that started it, like Victor Dover and others that that we know like are super famous, but now it's like our job, like how do we bring this forward, and then how do we also extend it not to just our industry, but like to other industries so that they know who we are. So, you know, just meeting even your friends, meeting people of other industries and just kind of talking to them about what we do. And, you know, that way they know what new urbanism is and what we like. I tell people all the time I'm an urban planner. They're like, what is that? Like, I have no idea what that is because it's not that common to outsiders. So yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't choose a topic until like this morning. I was like chewing my idea. At the end, I said I'm going to talk a little bit of it is some work I did when I was at doing my master thesis. I was trying to link transit development and the importance of public space, and I used as a case study my hometown in Mexico, and it made me realize how there's a big lesson, and probably something that, given the CNU is a very US focus and European focus, even there's a big lesson in Hispanic America, all Latin America, because I'll touch some of examples about it, but lessons to be how to build a neighborhood and how it relates to TOD. So if you see this city, what city do you think it would be?
La Ciudad, Mexico City.
It's like it could be many Latin American cities. It could also be Barcelona for some reason. Like it kind of has the shape and the structure. But the thing is, in 1573, the Spanish monarchy released a document that literally defines how you develop new cities in the New World. And that's why every single city in Latin America looks the same in their downtown. They have the same structure. And it's interesting how on my planning education here in the US, it's something that is never mentioned. The fact that there is a document that hundreds of cities were developed in the same structure, all like across 30 different nations, is actually very interesting. So the one on the left, on your right, your left, sorry, that's the medieval Aragonese city from Spain, 1300s. And we have a very rational structure where you have a central agora or space, and then civic buildings around it with the cathedral and all, and then the neighborhoods around them also follow a mini version of the same structure, a neighborhood plaza and a little church and a school and whatever. On the other image, that's one of the examples of how the cities in Latin America were developed. I think this one is an Argentinian city, but it could be any Latin American city. They're all lined up north to south and east-west. It's mostly because winds are dominant to the west. So that's normally how you plan a city. That's actually why many cities, the west side is normally the rich side, because the dominant winds take all the stuff away and have better air conditions. So if you think about all all the west of the cities are normally better than the east side. But the key lesson here is they use, and to me that was like an aha moment, even though it was very obvious as well. It's like the fact that they use a central square or a plaza mayor as the node zero of when you develop a city. So you have a square, you start with a square, and that's 4 streets that line up, and then all the city expands from there. And that's when I made me realize, oh, this is pretty much what TOD and the node concept is, and this is from the 1500s. And again, it could be very obvious, but then it's being like lying there and for everybody to grab, and not necessarily is how a node development. So this is how this is still for those cities. So you have a central square on the image on the left, and you say, and it says have the governor's house, the church, the city hall, retail, and then it just goes in radius. And when you see graphics like this could be transportation as well. The one on the other line is actually the main sewer line on those cities. And when I saw that graphic, it's like, it could be also the transit line. Again, is back to Calthorpe. Like, this is the same model. You have a central public open space, commercial around it, and then just residential. The difference here is like on the 1900s and on the 1900s and the last century. Now you have a different understanding of the space, and you need cars, but still the same overall structure. Just to go faster here. So I just explore a little bit more and that this is something for my thesis, how at the end you can still replicate this old map. And it's a TOD map. It's a neighborhood map. And the most important thing is not just about where you put the station is, you have an open space as node zero, and you have all certain type of uses that it's a neighborhood. So something I did, I tried to go back and find neighborhoods, not by the traditional boundaries of them, but by mapping what are the civic buildings and the open space. And many neighborhoods have been modified with time. So what used to be the central part of a neighborhood is no longer there. So we could just, by identifying the elements that make a neighborhood node, think of that as a map neighborhoods based on it. So this is I try to like line up with this is, for example, in Guadalajara. This is never in Guadalajara. Nobody in Guadalajara will tell you this is a neighborhood center, even though it's a public space with 2 transit lines, and it pretty much functions as a neighborhood center. But nobody will like, oh, what neighborhood is that? I don't know. That's not a neighborhood. So it's going back to, there's 500 years of history of developing cities in Latin America that could really inform how we see city structures and using public spaces as node zero or point zero. And that was pretty much it.
I think just like what I wanted to talk about was just kind of like the importance of knowing your like new urbanism, or like your story of like how you've been involved in like the planning like field or whatever that looks like for your industry.
Just wait a second. You will be able. Is audio recording? Okay, I hope it is.
It's not. It's okay. But essentially just understanding your story and being able to talk about it, and sharing your story is really important. And I think it can help energize and empower other people to like get involved and understand like you can come from a certain place and get to a certain place, and it's kind of incremental along the way, however you do it, and you'll take twists and turns and different things, as you go on and develop your career. And it can be like professionally, it can be outside of your profession. Like, so anyways, so kind of like my background is, now I'm like on the CNU board, involved in like CNU Illinois and all these things. But like, I started as, coming to grad school here, as a fall, having really no idea what I wanted to do for my master's. And I actually found out from Joe about, the Students for New Urbanism Illinois, and went to like kind of a mock charrette based around a spot in Rockford actually. And was like, thought it was just like the coolest thing next to sliced bread. And one of my questions during the charrette was, well, where does the parking lot go? Where does the parking garage go? And they're like, Gary, this isn't how this works. I was like, wow, okay, all right. So where's the street parking then? And they're like, Gary, let's stop. So it's just like, I wanted to learn more. I wanted to get more involved. So I found out there was a statewide conference in my local CNU Illinois chapter. So I went to that and just was like amazed with like the content and just want to learn more. So then I found out there was a transportation summit, a national CNU transportation summit that was going to be here in Chicago. So I went to be a volunteer note taker and just like took notes on like a session that I think I want to say like Mike Lyden or someone like that was doing, and Larry Gould and Jackie Grimshaw. And I was just like taking tons and tons of notes, and Marcy McAnally. And I was like, this is so cool. I want to get more involved. So then I asked someone there and networked with someone and said, could I get an internship, at the national office? And they're like, yeah, well, we don't really have a lot of openings right now, but the administration and like finance director at the time was like, you can come under me and kind of like learn more. So kind of in that position, I learned more and got to learn more about like CNU chapters and membership and start just creating connections, and found that to be really powerful for me. And then kind of pairing that with like my grad school experience, like learning about planning, learning about international places like Curitiba, Brazil, learning about different places within the United States, which have done like great planning and the history of that and kind of its intersection with new urbanism and different elements. So anyways, intern at CNU National, then worked at CNU, and then ended up leaving there, going to Pace Bus, working as a project manager, learning a ton about operations and kind of like the customer side. But now I'm managing paratransit for 2 different counties in the call center. So, but at that same time, then kind of like getting more involved with CNU at a national level. And really, it's because one of the people I met at this transportation summit, I was behind Larry Gould in line for lunch. He's like, you're kind of cool. You're, you should like get involved in transportation. And so Larry kind of took me under his wing. He was a mentor and kind of like was like, you should get more involved with chapters. And then this role on the board came up as the chapter representative. And where I'm kind of going with this, and I have like 45 seconds left, is that like a lot of stuff just kind of falls into your lap, and just do it. Just try it. Network with that one person. When someone reaches you out from like an organization, someone passes their name along, talk to them for like an hour, on the phone, and you'll build like a deeper connection. If somebody invited you to like listen to their podcast or like, whatever it might be, or read be a part of a book club, like I think there's a lot of room for professional growth and for informal connections that is really invaluable to not only yourself, but to the community that you're forming. And so that's really about it. But I think that like all of us should know our story and be able to like kind of talk about it. And obviously there's tons of stuff I left out, but just your story empowers other people to keep going. So that's what I got.